Patterson.
Hi, thanks everybody for coming and showing your support for Kingsley Burrell. Sadly, Kingsley is not the first and he won't be the last. I'm co-chair of United Families and Friends. As Charlie said, we're a coalition of families that came together when our loved ones died at the hands of the state. My twin brother died 24 years ago this November. 4 weeks ago, I got his death certificate only because I've been fighting the IPCC to reopen my brother's case. I had 3 inquests, and as Khadijah pointed out, none of us are represented, yet you, the taxpayer, pay for these officers to be 3 deep in legal representation. Us, the bereaved families, have nothing. I conducted my brother's inquest, all 3 of them. The first inquest got stopped because the custody sergeant's wife was on the jury.
Wow.
The second inquest, I managed to get an unlawful killing verdict, only because the jury argued for it, saying, if this toxicologist has falsified the evidence, which was proved because I had my brother's sample sent down to London, tested against myself and my mother's, and it came back that yes, those samples contained drugs, because that's what they said Leon died from, a drug overdose. But the truth is, the sample belonged to a white man who died of a heroin overdose. So when I've now brought this up at the inquest, the toxicologist for the state stood up in court and said, I feel I should make it known to the court I falsified the evidence by putting this man's name to somebody else's samples who died of an overdose. I managed to get an unlawful killing verdict. My brother was the second person in over 10 years. It took them 2 years to overturn the verdict on the grounds that the jury should never have been allowed unlawful killing. At the third inquest, they came back with Leon died from hypomania, which is, years ago they used happy delirium, which meant you got so euphorically happy you beat yourself to death. Well, that has now gone. It is now called hypomania. This was only introduced just for Leon. Once that inquest finished, it was struck off the books. I am now asking for the CPS and the IPCC since October, when they started on Kingsley's case, to reopen my brother's on the ground of perjury and perverting the course of justice. At each inquest, every officer that gave evidence was allowed to tear up their statements and start again. So we get to the second inquest, they write a new statement. By the time we get to the third inquest, the first and the second statements are not included. So we're now writing afresh.
Yeah.
When you first met my twin, he seemed like a very educated person. Affluent. He asked for a backgammon board, and we knew he wasn't from around here. By the time we get to the third inquest, my brother is the antithesis of the Crays. Yes, we are twins, but no, we are not the Crays. The picture they painted of my twin at that inquest was, thank God they got prisons to lock up people like this. So the story they painted of my twin is completely different to the person that they met. Leon had over 31 injuries on his body. When I viewed his body in the morgue, the chief inspector kept saying to me, you do know he did this to himself. You do know he beat himself to death. There was blood splattered up the cell walls, over a foot high. But your brother was rubbing his face on the floor. When I saw him in the mall, I told them, you've brought out the wrong body. That's not my twin. My mother is half Polish Jew, half English. My dad is from St Vincent. Now I'm sure I could recognise my own twin. Not at all on that day. We took the sheet off his body and you could see the truncheon marks down his body. The tip of his nose was missing. His knuckles were pink like this. The tip of his toes were pink like this. His knees were on his side. His testicles were so big and swollen. But you do know he did this to himself. You do know that this is self-inflicted. Mine is just a snippet. There are families out there fighting. Now what the IPCC tend to do is drag your case so the statutes of limitations come into effect. This is what they're trying to do to me by saying your 24 years statute of limitations passed. Well, if that's the case, why did Hillsborough get their case after 27 years? We as families are entitled to know how our loved one dies. Since 1968, over 4,000 people have died at the hands of the state. That's whether you come into contact at a police station, on the street, in prison, in a mental health unit, in a youth offenders unit. You are likely to die in suspicious circumstances.